One day I was driving my car over Laurel Canyon Boulevard and it was full of traffic, and I had this vision of a little girl sitting under a weeping willow tree writing. She was very sad and I could feel a passion for writing coming from her. Like she was lonely, like almost writing was her best friend or the only place that she could express herself. So in the traffic I pulled out my pen. In my bag I had a notebook and I wrote, "Write the vision of the little girl." And that was it. Years later, when I had moved back to New York, the vision came back to me of the little girl. When I was walking through Central Park, it sort of just entered me again. So I went home to my apartment and I started to write about this girl, not knowing anything about her. Sometimes I wanted to just work on the book so badly that I would miss auditions that I had in New York. I was very antisocial at the time because I just wanted to follow this little girl through her journey, through her experiences. But after a long time of this, it became very laborious, more than the work itself, but the distractions I had in New York, that I felt like I had to really go into the story much more without anything else. And I found a little flat in England where I could be alone in the solitude and just work on the books. Was living in a little town called Salcombe, which is the southernmost tip of Devon. Devon is connected to Cornwall. It's southern England and it's just the most glorious, magical place. You can feel a lot of fairy tale spirits there. And I continued to write the Sadie books. I pretty much finished them there. When I came back from England to New York, I had this huge, massive manuscript. It was 3,600 pages. I really didn't know what to do with it, and I remembered that I had met a very amazing editor in LA that was part of my writing group. His name was Chawan Choi. I had needed his help to edit this crazy, insane amount of work. So we started to work together, and it was Chawan's idea to make the books 26 novels instead of one long book. In the book, there are a lot of pieces of my life dramatized, because I think that's what happens as a writer. I think that you kind of innately use things from your life, fragments and riddles almost, like things that were unanswered, come back into a fantasy or a fiction, and they become one, they become a book. When I write, it's a very, very isolating thing for me. I know all writers, all artists work in different ways, that their nature is sort of conducive to work in. For example, some writers can work in cafes, answer the phone, and then go back to the scene or go back to the writing. And I can never do that. I really have to stay in the world. I think the character of Sadie is by far my most favorite character I've ever worked on in my life, because she's so endless. She has her little sarcasms and fears and those things, but ultimately she's without limits. There is nothing that could ever hold her imagination back. There is nothing that can hold her back physically from going after her dreams or fucking up her dreams or finding her dreams and then not feeling like she deserves it. I feel like she's almost like every woman, because every woman has a little girl in them. Because she was left alone and she was abandoned by her father and very hurt by her stepfather and her mother, there was nobody there for her ever in her life. She was able to go on this journey to discover herself, and she just discovers so many worlds and travels. The biggest work I've ever done in my life. The most, obviously, time-consuming, but also the most passionate thing I've ever done, because the joy of writing to me is like nothing else. These are the original Sadie notebooks where I hand-wrote most of the story. Some of them. The wind was ripping through the dandelion fields. The fence that stood alone shook, but the blue flowers hanging off it stayed still. A pale girl walked on the dirt road through the fog and mud puddles towards the fence, her long brown hair slapping against her face, covering her green eyes that seemed blue when she turned them to the sky. She pushed her thin body through the wind, the black Rolling Stones t-shirt she wore as a dress blowing into her stomach. When she stood in front of the fence, the flowers finally swayed, sprinkles of dew dying. Then she pulled them off, the crushed flowers in her hands. Falling to the earth, the wind never took them.